Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. For today's card, I decided to do a galaxy background. I haven't done one of these in a while. I honestly can't remember how long it's been. But I was going through the new Honeybee release, and this Good Friends little mini stamp set jumped out at me, and the first thing I thought of when I looked at it, I was like, I need to do a galaxy background. So I'm starting with some watercolor paper. And I am taping this down. I don't often tape down my watercolor paper because I'm just lazy. But this is going to be a few layers, lots of water, etc. So taped it down just to a hardboard. And then I'm using liquid watercolors today. You could use anything. I've done galaxy backgrounds with my Gownside Tomby watercolors, with distress inks, distress oxide inks, etc. Like anything works. I haven't used these in a while either. So I pulled them out, and I just have this little random plastic palette that actually had some Nouveau shimmer powders that I had painted with, again, over a year ago, whenever. And they had dried in the palette, and rather than clean them out, I was like, I just mix the liquid watercolors with them, because why not? Why not have a little extra shimmer? So I chose some of my favorite colors, and I didn't dilute them really at all, other than the brush itself is wet with clean water. And I just pick up the color, and I start slapping it on. And this is going to look horrible. The thing with the galaxy backgrounds, or at least the way I do them, it looks literally awful until it's done. Like, it is just one ugly mess. I have no rhyme or reason to it. I slap all that color on. I try not to like mix opposite colors. So say like green and purple, or pink and green, etc. Because then you get, an ugly brown color. But even then, even if you do, don't worry about it. Like, you're covering it all with black watercolor at the end, or black ink, or whatever. And then, the splatter, and it'll be fine. But it is ugly. This is one of these ones where it's definitely, you kind of want to go all the way to the end before you decide whether or not you want to keep, use it or not. Because, yeah. So I just slapped all that color on there. And then I just dried it with my heat tool. You could let it air dry if you want, but that takes a heck of a lot longer, and I just want to get it going. So I use my heat tool to dry it. And now I'm going in with black watercolor, and it's still going to look like a mess. That is okay. Sometimes I am picking up color with just some paper towel, just because it's too intense in areas. And then also adding a little bit of water here and there, that sort of thing. You just kind of play with it and just keep going with it. So I added the first layer with the black, and then I'm going to add yet another layer with more black, just intensify it. And I could have added even another, but I always find when I'm doing galaxy backgrounds, I don't like adding as much black. I really like more of the color showing through. But if you want it more intense and a bit more somewhat realistic looking, I would add another layer of black on top of this, so there isn't that much color, just those little hints of it. But I can't help it. I really like the color. So I'm just using great big watercolor brushes for this. I'm using like a size 12. I use a size 12 for the colors, and then I think I'm using like a size 14 for the black, just to completely cover this piece. And this piece is 5 by 7 inches, which originally I was going to cut down to make an A2 card, but in the end I actually make a 5 by 7 card, but I'll get to that. So I added this layer. Again, still looks like absolute garbage. But it's a splatter. It's the splatter that brings it all together. So I'm going to protect my work surface. I didn't want to peel this off the backing yet. It's just easier when it's still taped to the hardboard. So I just use my big flour sack cloth to kind of protect my work surface, because this is splatter that literally goes everywhere. So for this, I'm using, this is liquid. This is basically titanium white liquid. It's acrylic ink by Amsterdam. You could use white craft paint. I've used picket fence white paint by Distress, white gouache, anything like that'll work. So I do the bigger splatter with a paintbrush, and then I also use a little toothbrush that I dip into the white ink, and then I just rub my thumbnail against it. So of course I get it all over my hands. You could wear gloves for this, or use like toothpicks, etc. But this creates all that different sizes of splatter, which really makes this whole galaxy thing work. If you really wanted to go, you could add some like shimmer splatter as well. That would look really pretty, some sparkle. But I'm going to be adding other elements to this, so I was happy with that. So I let this completely dry. I removed the painter's tape, and then I trimmed it down. Like I said, I was originally going to make this into an A2 card, but I really liked the size of it and I didn't want to cut it down. So instead, all I did was just trim off the borders from taping it down. So it's it'll be slightly smaller than a 5x7 card. It ends up being like 4.5, I think, by 6.5, something like that. Just smaller than a 5x7 card so that the card base will actually frame it a bit. So I trimmed that down and then remembered to put my paper trimmer back on my desk because I need to trim down some cardstock to make a 5x7 card. So I have a full sheet of cardstock here and I am going to cut this down to 10 inches by 7 inches. Just some good heavyweight white cardstock. And then once that is trimmed, I will use my little score buddy and my Teflon bone folder and I will score this at 5 inches. So it'll be a side fold 5x7 card. So got that scored. So now my card base will be ready to go and I can put my big monster paper trimmer away. So got that ready to go. And then for the actual card front, I pulled out the Friend stamp set and Friend wafer die honey cuts, as well as the A7 thin frames wafer dies. So the A7 thin frames I ran through with some Tonic silver screen glitter paper. These wafer dies cut, as you can see, like an entire piece of frames. So all those extras, I'm just going to put right back in the packaging. So the next time I pull out this wafer die, I've got all these frames just ready to go. So set those aside. I picked out the one I wanted. And then the Friend wafer dies I die cut from the same silver glitter paper and then some white cardstock and some vellum. And I'm going to stack all these together with some craft tacky adhesive. So I've got the silver word, the white outline, and then I'll have the vellum as well. So then that's kind of the main part of my sentiment. And then I need to add companion sentiments to this. So I'm using the Friend stamp set that coordinates. So I pulled out the words that I decided to use on the front of the card. So pulled those out, and once I knew which ones I was going to use, I pulled out my Misty and a scrap of black cardstock. I lined up all 3 stamps on one line, just because this will just make it easier. You know, take those few extra seconds or minutes to line things up, and then it's just easier to trim it down when I'm done. So lined everything up. I used my anti-static powder tool on the black cardstock, and then I inked up the stamps with clear embossing ink, stamped it onto that black cardstock, coated it with detail white embossing powder, and then melted it with my heat tool, making sure to tilt it in the light to make sure I actually melted all the embossing powder. And then once that's melted, I can then trim these down, starting with one long strip, and then I'm going to separate them into the way they were as stamps, just because also that's how I wanted to place it on the card. So trim those down with my little guillotine paper trimmer, because that's the one that just fits better in my workspace. Because I don't have enough space for the big one, I literally have to keep it underneath my desk. So after everything is ready to go, I can start assembling. So I'm going to adhere this silver frame to my Galaxy background, just with some craft tacky adhesive. So kind of get that centered and in place. And then I decided with the sentiments that I was going to pop them up with little foam squares, because the Friend sentiment, it's chunky enough that I can hide the little foam squares and I don't have to sit and fiddle. I don't mind it sometimes to, trim little bits of, foam tape and all that sort of thing when it's finer sentiments, but sometimes it's nice to just be able to, slap them on and be done. So I put foam squares on the back, just hiding them behind the white cardstock so they don't peek out from the vellum. And then I can pop this into place, and then I did the exact same thing with the little sentiment strips as well. Just put the little foam squares on the back of them, and then adhered those as well. So once those are adhered, my card front is mostly finished. So now I want to stamp the inside of the card with the stamp that inspired this entire background. I originally was going to stamp the sentiment from this Good Friends set onto, vellum and wrap it around, because I've done that before. But I changed my mind, obviously, and did the die cut Friend word and sentiments on the front, and then it'll just finish off the inside really nicely. So lined up both sentiments from this Good Friends stamp set, and then made sure they were centered. I had to fold the card inside out to fit it in my Misty, because 5x7 card, even in a normal, regular size Misty, it won't fit. So I just folded the card inside out, and then I stamped the sentiment with VersaFine Clear Nocturne ink. Could have left it just here, but I wanted to add a little more color to the inside. So I pulled out the Far Out Friends. This is also a new set that kind of coordinates with the Good Friends and the whole space theme. And all I did was just there's a bunch of tiny little star stamps in the set. So I took a bunch of them, put them on acrylic blocks, and I'm just inking them up with some Distress Oxide inks in similar colors to the watercolors I used on the Galaxy background, and just stamped these little stars all around the sentiment just to tie it all together. So the inside says, good friends are like stars. You don't always see them, but you know they're always there. And then thanks for always being there for me. So after that was completely finished, stamped, dried, I'm going to adhere the card front panel with foam tape. Go big or go home. That was my motto with this card. It's like, I'm doing a 5x7 card, which I almost never do. Let's just make it as dimensional and bulky as possible because it's just fun and bling and, Galaxy background and all that stuff. So adhered that with foam tape. And then as a final little bit of embellishment, I had some star crystal, like iridescent star embellishments, as well as some silver crystals in my stash. So I just kind of adhered those on the background as well, just for that extra bling. So I adhered those into place with the Craft Tacky adhesive and just my little embellishment wand. And then once the glue is dried, this card is complete. So I did try to, I turned the flashlight on my phone to try and show the shimmer in the background the watercolors had picked up with that shimmer powder. It's subtle, but it's there. So I've got the silver glitter paper. There's a bit of shimmer in the background, the embellishments, just a blingy, fun card. So as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I will have a supply list with links to everything I use. You can check that out below if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching, for commenting, thumbs upping, subscribing, all of it. I really appreciate the support. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!